Right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Now, on this channel, we've been covering a lot of the theories associated with the New World Order recently, and we were talking about William Cooper and Behold a Pale Horse in the last upload. Right now, we're going to be talking, dealing with some things that are more about the aliens, but also just the entire concept of the super conspiracy. Because we also covered a book on this channel by Michael Barkin, A Culture of Conspiracy, that talked a lot about super conspiracies. And this is when they take different sort of conspiracy theories that are already in existence and they try and link them together. Like, for example, I just couldn't wait to tell somebody about this back in 2014 when I was like, oh my gosh, I found this theory online where it was like, it's talking about the Anunnaki, right? The Anunnaki were some of the ancient aliens out there, and they were saying that the Anunnaki engineered the DNA of human beings so they would become sort of a little bit different. That's just different. Like we're talking maybe even about infusing certain parts of things like the chromosome structure and such. And then this theory kind of put forward the idea that the Anunnaki engineered the DNA of a certain group of people in the Middle East, and these people became the 12 tribes of Israel. This is something that separates the 12 tribes of Israel from the rest of humanity, that they had their DNA genetically modified by the ancient aliens, the Anunnaki, and then that went on to become what we know as the Jewish people, Ashkenazi Jews. And that goes into other things like the Illuminati, the Rothschilds, all of the secret society theories that are associated with anti Jewish conspiracies. It's all because they believe that the bloodline of Judaism comes from the ancient alien engineering work of the Anunnaki. Do I personally believe that? No, I don't. I was just like, oh my goodness, like someone has found a way to incorporate the ancient alien theories with the New World Order theories. And I was just watching the documentary, Ancient Aliens and the New World Order #2. I guess I haven't seen part 1 yet, but I found it for free. So I was watching that one. And they were really trying to say some other big things. They're very big on the super conspiracy in this one, but this one was kind of firstly arguing more things about globalism. For starters, they talked about Woodrow Wilson advocating for the New World Order and using those direct terms, New World Order, back in 1912 and 1913. And I mentioned in the book Pale Horse Rider, they talked about Adolf Hitler advocating for the New World Order back in the 40s. And we had George H.W. Bush saying New World Order very famously. So it's like a lot of the theorists out there are just really going back further and further and further in time. And when I said that I didn't believe the Anunnaki, that the ancient aliens created the Jews, okay, excuse me if I don't believe that theory, what I would say that this is more resembling of our culture is that I think this represents something where the super conspiracies are going to be the future of conspiracy theories. Alex Jones would be an example of a super conspiracist, and we talked about William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse. That's a super conspiracy thing, and there are other examples out there of people like Webster Tarpley and Lyndon LaRouche. But what the reason why super conspiracies are just going to become bigger and bigger is because of the internet now, because we can share, like enormous, enormous uploads on YouTube, and we can just share documentaries that are homemade and self-produced, and people can make presentations so easily. They also have to kind of keep finding ways to make these things interesting and appealing to a wide range of audiences. So they're going to just try and make things more and more complex and more complicated. And in the past, like Daniel Pipes talks about this in the book Conspiracy from '97, that conspiracy theories were really shared through the books for decades. I mean, like, that was the biggest way to share things. But in '97, the internet was in its infancy, and we then started to first see conspiracy theories shared on the radio. I mean, yes, you might be thinking of Alex Jones, but William Cooper was also a radio host, and also you have people like James Fetzer, who what was the name of his radio show? Was it The Assault on Science or something like that? But it's difficult to find full episodes of his on YouTube. But I mean, James Fetzer has a lot of presentations on YouTube, and he participates in a lot of debates and discussions anyway. But, conspiracy theories then move to the radio, and now, of course, with something like YouTube user-generated content, people are just going to be making larger and larger, more complicated conspiracy theories. But to look at some of these things that we have going on here, I would say that the documentary that I was watching was advocating that the New World Order is behind the United Nations, Woodrow Wilson's League of Nations, the World Bank, the IMF, the WHO, the World Health Organization. But one of the big things that I really don't get out of these super conspiracy theories is that they're arguing this, but at the same time, it's almost just like, how do you prove that that was done with malicious intent from the globalists to create this sort of one world government where humanity would be under complete submission of a ruling elite? I mean, what do you expect to happen post World War II? I mean, after the Second World War, wouldn't these things just arise anyway, so we wouldn't have more wars in the future? And you can criticize the United Nations for certain amounts of wrongdoing. You can criticize the WHO because you think that certain things are impractical. But I don't really see this enormous amount of proof that all of these things are kind of centered on a globalist plot to destroy humanity. On the other hand, this documentary really highlighted something, that there are two families that are at the center of all of these New World Order conspiracy theories, and that would be the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And I'm really glad that they brought that up, because the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers are just two names that just come up all the time. The Rothschilds is mostly because of the wealth that they have. Supposedly, they actually have control over more wealth than any family on the planet Earth. And the Rockefellers are everywhere. Whether it's talking about Nelson Rockefeller getting in touch with Henry Kissinger at Harvard, and Henry Kissinger's rise to fame in becoming Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, was mostly influenced by his connection to Nelson Rockefeller. And supposedly Nelson Rockefeller even paid for Henry Kissinger's honeymoon and stuff like that. And then they tie that in as well to Zbigniew Brzezinski, that he was talking about Carter's national security advisor, that he was working for David Rockefeller. And there are a lot of ways that really pull these things in. And these are things that I've talked about on this channel. When you want to talk about conspiracy theories in the New World Order, what I would say is, we definitely do have an oligarchy. I admit that much, and I don't really say that in any sort of facetious way. We do have an oligarchy where it's like, it's not an aristocracy done by bloodline. There are people who have sort of elite backgrounds. And what happens is, though, you're able to pull new people into this higher echelon of human leadership and governance, and people who are ruling the country and the world, really, because there are people that sort of had the old connections from the previous generations of royalty, nobility, aristocracy. Those connections never went away. But now we're no longer doing things by bloodline. You're allowed to pull new people into this elite level. And even this whole thing about Occupy Wall Street and the 99% and the 1%, I mean, we have a 1%, and all of the 99%ers, they want to be in the 1%. And it's like, if you want to view this sort of like kind of top 1%, it's not financial. No, this is not about income. Just because someone is making $100,000 a year, just because someone is making $1 billion, like Oprah or Michael Jordan. I mean, Michael Jordan is now a billionaire, actually. He prospered after his athletic career. That doesn't mean that he's one of the ruling global elites of the planet Earth. No, it's more just like there's a very select group of people that have both money and power, and they pull new people into that. Now, when we want to look at some of the things, though, that were put forward in this Ancient Aliens New World Order theory, they're saying that there's been an alien who's been working at the Pentagon since 1943, and that aliens also are conducting torturous experiments on people in the Pentagon. I'll accept it once I have the proof. I mean, a lot of this is just based on testimony, and it's also coming secondhand. Bill Nye was very keen to warn us about looking out for this stuff when he's like, many things associated with conspiracy theories are coming from someone who claims to have known someone who saw this. Like, this is a perfect example of it. So we always have to be aware of this tactic. When they're saying that somebody has reported that there was an alien working at the Pentagon since 1943 and doing torturous experiments. Well, why isn't that guy appearing in the documentary? Oh no, well it's too classified. It would jeopardize his livelihood and stuff like that. Well, if he's not appearing in the documentary and sharing this his firsthand knowledge, then it's going secondhand, a friend of a friend, and then a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, and it's going slowly more down the line. But what I would say, though, is very significant of a lot of these things is that we need to recognize that, the oligarchy things are most likely true. But one of the things that they were just talking about in this film is the New World Order and its connections to the European Union. And we've mentioned the theory before that the European Union is controlled by the Bilderberg Group, which is the largest lobbying meeting in the world, and they move the EU to the advantage of the Bilderbergers. And the Bilderberg plan, and the EU was actually a Nazi plan orchestrated by Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. Well, the things with that is like, why are so many people so opposed to unions like of this nature? Like, I mean, like the having a North American union, they're just like putting this out like, oh, it would be horrible if we had a North American union the way we have a European union and an African union. I mean, I don't really think they kind of argued and explained their case too well about why those would be such horrible things. I mean, they're saying that it's all orchestrated by the New World Order, but they didn't really explain a lot of the disadvantages associated with that. I recently did an upload about the Humanity Party on this channel, and we talked about they're advocating for this. They're a political party that is advocating for a one world government. I mean, they're really trying to rush the cycle. But if we want to get back to some of the things with the alien theories, you know about the Anunnaki, the ancient aliens that supposedly modified the genetics of humanity. Before you think that that sounds like a crazy theory, it was entertained by Richard Dawkins of all people, who was just like this was during his debate with Ben Stein, and there was just one line in there when he was like, I mean, he said that he would rather entertain the theory that we were engineered by ancient aliens than the creator or something like that. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he did say that during his debate with Ben Stein, and it's like, just it really does receive a lot of support in a lot of different ways. But when it comes to the ancient alien theories, it's just that we have a lot of ancient evidence that people are trying to interpret it in a bunch of different ways. Other people have also looked at the possibility that the kind of mythological figures, like, the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians, like their concepts of the quote-unquote gods, were actually dealing with ancient aliens. And this is mentioned in Ancient Aliens and the New World Order, the documentary that I was watching. Well, I mean, those things are kind of very fascinating to explore. And I think it's sort of, when it comes to the Greek gods, though, just with a little bit of familiarity, I mean, they're definitely talking about much more natural things, like, Persephone and Demeter explaining the changes and the seasons. And, I mean, I love, like, the Greeks and the Romans, because they kind of just really, really tie in things to nice explanations. But if we want to kind of do a little pivot from that and talk more about the concept of globalism, I would say that the theorists who are promoting the New World Order and the globalists, and they want a one world government because it's going to make humanity easier to control, well, why are they saying that as opposed to just, it happened this way? And, I mean, like, this is how the Superconspiracy forms. They're kind of just making some very bold connections. One of the absolute best conspiracy theories that I ever heard was it was something with a group called the New Waubians. And if you want to talk about conspiracy theorists, they're all about government mind control. And they had a leader who was down somewhere in the deep south. I wanted to say Georgia. I forget his name, but his group was called the New Waubians. And he even proposed that the mind control experiments went so far as the government was brainwashing African American youths with Dr. Seuss. That Dr. Seuss was a government agent, and he was using, you know, Sam I am Sam, like from Green Eggs and Ham, is it's government indoctrination because the government's name is Sam, and he's trying to make black people submissive to the state. This isn't my theory. This was something that was real out there. But the leader of the New Waubians got arrested for child molestation or something like that, something heinous, and we haven't heard from him since. But anyway, the point is, we're going to see more super conspiracies in the future because I think it's just one way that people can kind of attract in an audience. I find that, like, if you want to talk about stuff, I really would wish they talk more about the oligarchy, not as a calculated way, but just that the oligarchy is something that exists because, once again, it's like you have a group of ruling people who can control things, and new people can be incorporated into it because they're still relying on the same financial controls that were already established centuries ago. If you want to talk about that as like an actual sort of kind of super conspiracy, I'm all ears. But to say that Jewish people were engineered by ancient aliens, yeah, I can't really endorse that just yet. But what do you think about any of these ancient alien theories? I'd love to hear some comments, and that's all for me. Talk to you soon.